At 75 years old, I finally understood something I wish someone had told me when I was 50. Getting older isn't the hardest part. The hardest part is realizing how much of your life you've spent fighting things you were never going to control. People change, bodies change, families change, money changes, and time keeps moving, whether you're ready for it or not. My name is Margaret Elaine Carter. I'm 75 years old. I've been a mother, a wife, a divorcee, a friend, and, for most of my life, someone who thought happiness would come after everything was finally in order. I was wrong. My marriage ended when I was 57. It hurt. But looking back, my divorce wasn't the biggest lesson of my life. The bigger lesson was what happened afterward. I had to learn how to live without constantly comparing my present to the life I thought I was supposed to have. I had to accept that my body would change, that my children would grow into lives of their own, that some friendships would disappear, that money couldn't buy back time, and that nobody was coming to give me permission to enjoy the life I still had. Those became the 5 harsh truths I wish I'd accepted much earlier. And if you enjoy stories about aging, independence, harsh truths that people don't often talk about, and the lessons nobody teaches us until we learn them the hard way, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more wisdom ahead. And the first one took me years to understand. Your body will change, and you cannot negotiate with time. I know that's not a pleasant truth, but I'm not here to tell you something simply because it sounds good. At 75, my body doesn't work the way it did at 30. There are mornings when I have to move slowly. There are clothes in my closet that belong to a version of me I no longer recognize. And there are photographs that make me stop and stare at the woman I used to be. For years, I looked at those photographs with regret. I'd see my younger face and think, what happened to me? Then one afternoon, I found an old photograph of myself at 31. I remembered the day it was taken. I had been exhausted. I was worried about money. I was worried about my marriage. I was worried about my children. I was worried about things that seemed enormous at the time. Yet when I looked at that photograph decades later, all I saw was youth. And suddenly I felt sorry for that younger woman. Not because she looked old, because she had no idea how quickly the years would pass. She was so busy worrying about the future that she didn't realize she was already living a future she would one day miss. That changed the way I looked at aging. I realized that every line on my face came from somewhere. Some came from laughter, some from worry, some from grief, some from raising children, some simply came from living. So I stopped asking, how do I get my old face back? I started asking, how do I take care of the woman I am now? That's a completely different question. Aging doesn't mean you stop caring about yourself. Take care of your body. Move when you can. Rest when you need to. Eat well. See your doctor when necessary. But don't turn self-care into self-hatred. You don't have to look 30 to deserve a good day. You don't have to hide every wrinkle. You don't have to apologize for changing. Your age is not a failure. It's evidence that you've made it this far. And once I understood that, I could finally move on to something even more difficult. Because your body changing is something you can see. The next truth involves the people you love. Your children can love you without building their lives around you. When my children were young, I was needed constantly. If they were sick, they called me. If they were frightened, they called me. If they needed advice, money, food, a ride, or simply someone to listen, I was there. I became so accustomed to being needed that I didn't notice when being needed became part of my identity. Then my children grew up. Their lives became busy. My daughter, Emily, had children of her own. She had work, a marriage, bills, problems I couldn't solve for her. And sometimes she wouldn't call for days. At first, I told myself I understood. Then I started making little comments. You must be very busy. I guess you don't have much time for your mother anymore. I remember when you used to call every day. I thought I was was expressing loneliness, but I was actually creating guilt. One evening, Emily came to my house. We sat at the kitchen table, and she finally told me how she felt. She said, "Mom, I love you, but sometimes I feel like nothing I do is enough." That sentence stopped me. My first instinct was to defend myself, but instead, I listened. She told me she felt guilty whenever she couldn't visit, guilty when she missed my calls, guilty when she had to leave early. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Mom, I don't want visiting you to feel like an exam I can fail." I sat there quietly, because suddenly I understood. My daughter already loved me. I had simply been measuring her love by the number of calls and visits I received. I was keeping score. And love shouldn't be a scoreboard. That night, I realized that my children could love me deeply and still have lives that didn't revolve around me. That doesn't mean you shouldn't tell your children when you're lonely. You should. If you need help, ask. If you want to see them, tell them. But don't make them prove their love every time they walk through the door. Your children are allowed to grow. They're allowed to make mistakes. They're allowed to be busy. And you're allowed to have a life that doesn't depend on their availability. Once I stopped counting how long it had been since Emily visited, something unexpected happened. Our conversations became easier. She didn't feel like she was walking into a test. I didn't feel like I was waiting to be disappointed, and we became closer. Sometimes, loving people means giving them enough freedom to choose to come closer. That lesson prepared me for another kind of loss: friendship. The next truth teaches you to brace up. Some people will leave your life. I used to believe that if you knew someone for decades, they would always be part of your life. I was wrong. I had a friend named Helen. We met in our 40s. For years, we talked constantly. We knew each other's families. We celebrated birthdays together. We shared problems that nobody else understood. I assumed we'd grow old together. Then her circumstances changed. Her husband became ill. Her responsibilities increased. Our conversations became less frequent. Eventually, months could pass without us speaking. I took it personally. I wondered what I had done wrong. I replayed old conversations in my head. But eventually, I realized something. Maybe the friendship hadn't failed. Maybe life had simply changed. That realization allowed me to reach out without demanding an explanation. I sent Helen a simple message. "I was thinking about you. I hope you're okay." She responded 2 days later. She told me she was struggling. She said she missed me. And suddenly, I realized how easily I had turned someone else's difficult season into a story about my own rejection. That experience taught me something I wish I had known much earlier. Not every distance is rejection. Sometimes people are simply fighting battles you cannot see. And sometimes, despite everything, a relationship really does come to an end. That hurts. But a relationship doesn't have to last forever to have been meaningful. Some people are part of your life for decades. Others are there for a season. Both can matter. As you get older, your circle may become smaller. Don't automatically assume that means your life has become poorer. Sometimes, a smaller circle simply means you're more selective about who gets your energy. Pay attention to the people who are still there. The friend who calls, the neighbor who checks on you, the family member who listens, the person who makes you laugh. Don't spend all your energy chasing people who have already chosen another direction, because time becomes more precious as you get older. And that leads to the fourth truth. Money matters, but it cannot buy back time. I want to be clear. Money matters. Financial security matters. Planning for the future matters. But there is a point where preparing for tomorrow can become a way of avoiding today. I knew a man named Arthur who was extremely careful with money. He worked hard, he saved, he rarely took vacations. If someone invited him somewhere, he would say, "Maybe next year." If someone suggested an expensive dinner, he'd say, "There's always next time." He wasn't irresponsible. He was afraid. He wanted to make sure he would be okay later. Eventually, he had enough money to be comfortable. But by then, his energy wasn't what it had been. One afternoon, he said something I'll never forget. I spent so much time making sure I'd be okay later that I forgot to ask whether I was okay now. That sentence stayed with me. I'm not telling you to spend recklessly. I'm telling you not to put your entire life on hold while waiting for the perfect financial moment. If you can afford the dinner, enjoy it. If you can take the trip, take it. If you've been saving the good dishes for a special occasion, use them. If you have flowers you love, put them where you can see them, because sometimes the special occasion is simply today. At 75, I've learned that the most valuable moments aren't always expensive. A conversation, a walk, a cup of coffee, a laugh, a phone call, a quiet morning. These things cost very little, but you can't buy yesterday back. That's why I no longer want to spend every present moment preparing for a future I cannot guarantee. I want to prepare responsibly, but I also want to live. And that brings me to the hardest truth of all. Nobody is coming to give you permission to live. For most of my life, I waited. I waited for the children to grow up. I waited for my marriage to get better. I waited for money to feel safer. I waited for the right time. I waited to stop caring what people thought. Then my marriage ended when I was 57. For a while, I thought my life had ended with it. But eventually, I had to ask myself something uncomfortable. How long am I going to let something that ended years ago decide what happens next? That question changed me. I started doing small things. I took myself out for lunch. I bought flowers for my kitchen. I wore clothes I liked instead of clothes I thought I was supposed to wear. I learned to say no without writing an apology in my head afterward. And one Saturday, I went to a cafe by myself. I ordered coffee and lemon cake. I sat near the window. I watched people walking outside. Nothing extraordinary happened, but I felt peaceful, and I realized something. For much of my life, I had confused being useful with being valuable. If someone needed me, I felt important. If I solved a problem, I felt needed. But what happens when nobody needs you? Who are you then? I had to learn the answer. I'm still Margaret. I'm still a mother. I'm still a friend. I'm still someone who makes mistakes. But I'm also a woman who deserves to enjoy her own company. That may be one of the strangest gifts of growing older. Eventually, you have to meet yourself without all the roles you used to hide behind. And you have to decide whether you actually like the person you find there. I do now. Not because I'm perfect. I'm not. I still have lonely days. I still worry. I still get irritated over things that don't matter. I still wish some parts of my past had turned out differently. But I don't need my past to change before I'm willing to enjoy my present. That's the difference. Acceptance isn't giving up. Acceptance is stopping the fight against reality, so you can use your energy on the life that's actually in front of you. At 75, I understand these 5 truths differently. My body will change, so I take care of it without hating it. My children will live their own lives, so I love them without keeping score. Some people will leave, so I appreciate the people who are still here. Money matters, so I prepare for the future without sacrificing every moment of today. And nobody is coming to give me permission, so I give myself permission. Permission to laugh, permission to rest, permission to start something new, permission to say no, permission to wear the bright dress, permission to take the photograph, permission to enjoy an ordinary Tuesday, because an ordinary Tuesday can become a memory before you realize it. That's what aging has taught me. You don't know which day will be your last ordinary day. You don't know which conversation you'll remember 10 years from now. You don't know which photograph you'll someday wish you had taken. So pay attention. Not every day has to be extraordinary. It just has to be lived. And if you're younger than me, please don't wait until 75 to understand this. Don't spend your 20s worrying about your 40s. Don't spend your 40s worrying about your 60s. Don't spend your 60s wishing you had lived differently. You have today. Use it. Call someone. Forgive someone. Take the walk. Wear the clothes. Make the appointment. Start the hobby. Sit outside. Tell someone you love them. And if you have been carrying an old disappointment for years, Ask yourself one question. Is this still worth the space it occupies in my life? Maybe it is. Maybe you still need to work through it. But maybe it isn't. Maybe you're carrying an old argument, an old expectation, an old version of yourself, an old regret. You don't have to erase your past. You simply don't have to live inside it. I'm 75 years old. I don't know exactly how many years I have left, but I know something now that I didn't know when I was younger. I don't want to spend the years I have left arguing with the years that are already gone. I tried that. It made me tired. Now I want to be here, fully. At 75, I've stopped asking why life didn't turn out the way I imagined. It didn't. And maybe that's okay. My marriage ended. My children grew up. Some friends disappeared. My body changed. Years passed that I can never get back. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was spending too much energy mourning the life I expected, and not enough appreciating the one I actually had. So now, I don't chase yesterday. I don't wait for tomorrow to give me permission. I pay attention to today, because I've learned something simple. Aging doesn't take away your right to be happy. Sometimes, it teaches you what happiness was supposed to mean. I finally understand that a good life doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be yours. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what's one thing you've stopped worrying about as you've gotten older? Maybe your answer is the lesson someone else needs today.